Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Mount Lady found Deku first. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was gray. It wasn't a metaphorical gray, or an artistic interpretation of depression. It was just gray. Concrete walls, asphalt roads, steel railings, and the fading, dirty steam rising from a skeleton of a man. Izuku Midoriya stood on the rooftop, the wind whipping his school uniform against his frame, chilling the sweat that had dried on his back. His red shoes felt leaden, glued to the tar paper of the roof. He stared at the door where All Might, no, where the stranger who carried All Might's name, had disappeared. I cannot simply say you can become a hero even without power. The words didn't echo. They didn't ring. They just landed, heavy and flat, like a coffin lid closing. Izuku looked down at his hands. They were trembling. Not with excitement, not with fear, but with a hollow, terrifying emptiness. For 10 years, he had been running on a fuel made of delusion and stubbornness. He had taken the beatings, the burns, the name Deku, and the laughter, all because he held on to a single, shining ember of belief that if he just tried hard enough, the universe would blink and grant him a chance. The number one hero just poured a bucket of ice water on that ember. Reality, Izuku whispered, his voice cracking. Right. Reality. He walked to the edge of the roof. For a terrified second, a dark, intrusive thought clawed at the back of his mind, take a swan dive. But he shook it away violently. He wasn't brave enough for that. He wasn't brave enough for anything. He was just Deku. He turned and began the long trudge down the stairs. He had a notebook to retrieve. He had a future to cancel. He had to go home and tell his mother that she could stop apologizing to him, because he was finally giving up. The city of Muzurifu was loud. It was usually a comforting noise, the hum of traffic, the buzz of electronic billboards, the distant sirens of heroes at work. Today, it sounded like static. Izuku walked without looking up. He watched his red sneakers scuff against the pavement. He passed the convenience store where he usually stopped to read hero magazines. He kept walking. He passed the park where he played as a kid. He kept walking. Then came the explosion. It was a chest-rattling boom that shook the glass in the storefronts next to him. A plume of black smoke spiraled into the sky a few blocks away. Instinct is a cruel thing. Before his brain could process the despair weighing him down, his legs pivoted. He was running toward the smoke before he remembered he wasn't supposed to care anymore. Why am I running? He thought, his lungs burning. I can't do anything. All Might said so. The world said so. But the habits of a superfan were hard to break. He pushed through the gathering crowd, weaving between legs and onlookers holding up their phones, until he reached the police barricade. The scene was a nightmare. The alleyway was engulfed in flames. Shattered glass littered the street like diamonds in the dirt. And in the center of the inferno, a mass of undulating, dark green sludge was wreaking havoc. It had eyes, wild, manic eyes, and a mouth full of jagged liquid teeth, and it had a hostage. Izuku squinted, shielding his eyes from the heat. The heroes were already there. It's Death Arms. A bystander shouted. And Slugger. And Kamui Woods. Izuku's analytical mind flickered on, a ghost in the machine. Death Arms specializes in heavy lifting, but he can't grab a fluid opponent. Kamui Woods is weak to fire. He can't get close without risking his quirk. Mt. Lady. He looked up. The giantess, the rookie sensation who had debuted just that morning, was standing at the entrance of the alley. She was huge, easily 20 meters tall, but she was stopped dead in her tracks. The street was a two-lane road flanked by dense office buildings. I can't get in there. You Takayama, hero name Empty Lady, shouted, her voice booming over the sirens. She stomped a massive foot in frustration, cracking the pavement. My hips are too wide for this street. If I squeeze in, I'll take down the structural supports of both buildings. Just keep the crowd back. Death Arms roared, dodging a whip of sludge. We have to wait for a specialist. A specialist? Izuku whispered. But, the hostage. He looked back at the villain. The sludge shifted, revealing a flash of blonde hair. A familiar school uniform. And then, for a split second, a face. Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo wasn't screaming. He couldn't. The sludge was forcing its way into his mouth and nose, suffocating him. But his eyes, those red, usually arrogant eyes, were wide open. They were filled with a primal, animalistic terror. Help me! The thought didn't come from Izuku's brain. It came from his gut. The noise of the crowd faded. The scolding voice of All Might vanished. The fear of death evaporated. Izuku's backpack slipped from his shoulder to his hand. His legs, traitorous and wonderful, exploded into motion. Hey! Come back here, kid! Death Arms shouted. Izuku didn't hear him. He ducked under the yellow tape. He sprinted across the broken asphalt. The heat was intense, stinging his eyebrows, but he focused entirely on those terrified red eyes. What do I do? What do I do? He had no plan. He had no quirk. He had a yellow backpack and a lifetime of notes. The sludge villain noticed him. You again? The invisible kid? I'll kill you this time. A tendril of sludge, thick as a tree trunk, lashed out. Izuku didn't dodge. He didn't know how. He just threw the only weapon he had. The yellow backpack sailed through the air, the strap catching the wind. It was a desperate, pathetic throw, but physics was on his side. The bag's corner, weighted down by heavy textbooks, slammed directly into the villain's bulging liquid eye. Grah! The villain recoiled, his fluidity disrupted. For a second, just 1 second, the sludge loosened around Bakugo's face. Bakugo gasped, sucking in a lungful of smoky air. Deku? Izuku skidded to a halt in the mud, his hands clawing at the sludge, trying to pull it away. Kaken! Hold on, why are you here? Bakugo rasped, explosions popping weakly in his palms. I don't know! Izuku screamed, tears mixing with the soot on his face. His smile was a rictus of terror. My legs, they just moved on their own. You looked like you were asking for help. Behind the crowd, a skeletal man gripped a light pole so hard the metal groaned. All Might watched, blood dripping from his mouth, his heart pounding against his ribs. Pathetic, he thought, hating himself. I'm a fake. I'm chastising a boy for dreaming while I stand here and watch him die. He tried to force the power, to summon the muscle form, but his body screamed in protest. Not yet. I need 1 more second. But seconds were things Izuku Midoriya didn't have. The sludge villain recovered. The eye healed instantly. You little pest! The sludge rose up, forming a massive, guillotine-like blade of fluid and debris above Izuku and Bakugo. Death Arms was too far away. Kamui Woods was pinned by fire. Izuku looked up at Death. He didn't close his eyes. He stood in front of Bakugo, raising his useless, scarred arms. I'm sorry, Mom. Yu Takayama was having a bad day. Her debut had gone okay, sure. She'd stolen the spotlight from Kamui, got some good photos, and her agency was already blowing up her phone about talk show appearances. But the reality of the business was already setting in. She was broke. Her agency was a glorified closet in a bad part of town. And now, she was standing uselessly at the edge of a disaster, calculating liability insurance in her head. If I shrink, I'm just a normal woman with average strength, she thought, biting her lip. If I stay big and force my way in, I destroy the facade of the Ito building. That's a 40 million yen lawsuit. I'll be bankrupt before my first paycheck. She watched the heroes struggle. It was standard procedure, contain and wait. It was the smart play. Then the kid ran in. You blinked. He was scrawny, messy-haired, and looked like he was about to wet his pants. But he ran past the pros. He ran past the line. Is he suicidal? She watched him throw his bag. She watched him claw at the sludge. She saw the sheer, unadulterated desperation in his posture. Something in Yu's chest tightened. It wasn't a heroic swelling of justice. It was something sharper. It was annoyance. She was annoyed that the veterans were standing around. She was annoyed that a middle schooler had bigger balls than the men in spandex. And mostly, she was annoyed that she was standing there doing math while a kid was about to get pasted. 40 million yen, she muttered to herself. The villain raised a massive sludge blade. You looked at the camera crews. They were filming the kid. If that kid died while she stood there worrying about masonry, Screw the budget. Yu Takayama didn't shrink. She didn't stay still. She moved with the speed of a titan. She dropped her shoulder and rammed it into the gap between the buildings. Concrete screamed. Glass shattered in a cascading rain of shards. The steel girders of the Ito building groaned and buckled, but she shoved herself through the bottleneck like a battering ram. Canyon. She was too big to kick. She was too big to punch properly in the tight space. So she slid, like a baseball player stealing home. Empty Lady threw her 68-foot frame feet first into the combat zone. The ground shook violently, knocking Death Arms off his feet. Her massive boot, the size of a sedan, skidded through the asphalt, creating a trench that intercepted the villain. The sludge blade came down, but it didn't hit Izuku. It splashed harmlessly against the purple spandex of Empty Lady's shin. The villain froze, staring up at the mountain that had just crashed into his alley. Yu grit her teeth, ignoring the stinging scrapes on her arms from the buildings she had just desecrated. She reached down, her hand engulfing the entire villain. Crush her. She didn't crush him, though. She squeezed. She squeezed with the force of a hydraulic press. The sludge villain's eyes bulged. Let go. You're disgusting, she spat, her voice vibrating the windows of the neighborhood. And you're ruining my debut. She tightened her grip. The sludge couldn't maintain its form under that much pressure. With a wet splorch, Bakugo was ejected from the mass, coughing and tumbling onto the pavement. Izuku stared, paralyzed. A giant hand was inches from his nose. He looked up, and up, to see the rookie hero glaring down at the villain, debris from the shattered buildings dusting her hair like snow. She had destroyed half the street. She had likely caused millions in damages. She was the coolest thing he had ever seen. The aftermath was a cacophony of sirens and camera shutters. The police had collected the unconscious villain in separate jars. Paramedics were tending to Bakugo, who was sitting on the back of an ambulance, draped in a blanket, glaring at the ground. Izuku was sitting on the curb, his uniform ruined, his face streaked with soot and tears. He braced himself. He knew what was coming. The heroes were gathering around him. Death Arms looked furious. Kamui Woods was shaking his head. Are you insane? Death Arms barked, pointing a thick finger at Izuku's face. You could have gotten yourself killed. You interfered with official hero work. Do you have a death wish, kid? There was absolutely no reason for a civilian to put himself in danger, Kamui Woods added, crossing his wooden arms. You were a liability. If Empty Lady hadn't. Hey! Trees! The booming voice stopped them. Yu Takayama had shrunk back down to her normal height, 162 centimeters, though she still commanded the space. She walked over, brushing concrete dust off her shoulders. Her costume was scuffed, and there was a rip in her stocking, but she walked with a hip sway that demanded attention. She stepped between Izuku and the pros. You guys done yelling at the only person who actually moved? She asked, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, but her eyes sharp. Death Arms blinked. Empty Lady, he ran in when you were busy holding back the crowd, she interrupted. She turned to the press. The cameras, sensing drama, zoomed in. You knew this game. She knew it better than she knew how to fight. The public loved a savior, but they adored a scandal. And Pro's bully brave child was a headline she could spin. She looked down at Izuku. The boy was trembling, expecting a slap. Yu sighed internally. This kid is a PR goldmine waiting to happen. The teary eyes, the muddy face, the underdog vibe. If I play this right, nobody is going to care about the 2 buildings I just wrecked. She crouched down, bringing her face level with Izuku's. Hey! Green bean, Izuku hiccuped. Gee, green bean? That was stupid, she said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Incredibly, recklessly stupid. Izuku flinched, looking down. I know. I'm sore, but she said, raising her voice, grabbing his chin and forcing him to look at her. She smiled, not her media smile, but a smirk that felt like a conspiracy. You were the only one with the guts to do it. The cameras flashed blindingly. She stood up, draping an arm heavily around Izuku's shoulders, pulling him into her side. He stiffened, turning bright red. Look at this. Empty Lady announced to the press, gesturing to Izuku like he was a prize she had won at a carnival. While everyone else was waiting for the perfect conditions, this kid jumped into the fire. That's the kind of spirit we're missing these days, right? She glared at Death Arms over Izuku's head. Death Arms closed his mouth, realizing the tide had turned. If he scolded the boy now, he'd look like a coward. What's your name, kid? She whispered in his ear. Midoriya, he squeaked. Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya! She beamed at the cameras. Remember the name. The boy with the heart of a titan. It was complete nonsense. It was total spin. It was the greatest moment of Izuku's life. 20 minutes later, the crowd had dispersed. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the deep, aching exhaustion of emotional trauma. Izuku stood near the police line, holding the strap of his charred yellow backpack. Deku. Izuku turned. Bakugo stood there. He looked smaller than usual, stripped of his bravado. I didn't ask for your help, Bakugo grit out, his voice hoarse. And you didn't save me. I was fine. Don't look down on me just because you did something stupid. He turned and marched away, shoulders hunched. Izuku watched him go. For the first time, Bakugo's anger didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a defense mechanism. Charming friend you got there. Izuku jumped. Empty Lady was leaning against a lamppost, checking her phone. She looked tired now. The glamour had faded slightly, revealing a young woman who was worried about the emails flooding her inbox. MMT, lady. Izuku bowed rapidly. Thank you? Thank you for saving me. And for saying those things. You waved her hand dismissively. Save it. I just didn't want the headlines to be about the Edo building suing me. She sighed, scrolling through Twitter. Although, trending as Titan Savior is helping mitigate the canyon crash tag, she looked up at him. So, what's your quirk anyway? Telekinesis? Super strength? You threw that bag pretty hard. Izuku froze. The warmth of the last 20 minutes evaporated. The cold reality rushed back in. He swallowed. I don't have one. You paused, her thumb hovering over her screen. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the oversized red shoes, a dead giveaway for the extra toe joint. She saw the scars on his arms. Quirkless? She asked flatly. Yes, Izuku whispered, staring at his feet. I just wanted to be a hero. Just for a second. I know it's impossible. Everyone says so. You stared at him. Quirkless. In the hero industry, that was a death sentence. It was marketing poison. A hero without power was just a cosplayer. But then she remembered the look in his eyes when he ran past Death Arms. She remembered the notebook she had seen peeking out of his burnt backpack, filled with frantic scribbles. And she remembered her bank account balance. A quirkless kid trying to be a hero. Her mind whirred. That's a tragedy. Or it's a narrative. The sympathy vote would be insane. The merch sales for the underdog demographic. Plus, if he's quirkless, he has to work twice as hard. He'd be desperate. He'd be cheap labor. Yu Takayama wasn't a saint. She was a businesswoman with a gigantification quirk and a mountain of debt. But as she looked at this kid, who looked like he was waiting for her to laugh at him, she felt a twinge of something else. Kinship? She was a country girl who came to the city to be big. He was a nothing kid trying to be something. She reached into her belt pouch and pulled out a sleek, purple business card. Here. She flicked it at him. Izuku fumbled and caught it. MT. Lady Agency Yu Takayama? I need an intern, she said casually, going back to her phone. Izuku blinked. Huh? But I'm in middle school. And I'm quirkless. So? I don't need you to fight villains. I need someone to sort my fan mail, run my coffee, and manage my schedule because I am terrible with dates. She glanced at him sideways. And you analyzed that villain, didn't you? You aimed for the eye because you knew it was a fluid weak point. Yes. I have notes on most villains with mutable forms, Izuku stammered. Useful, she said. Brains are cheaper than support gear. She pushed off the lamppost. Kid, you're trending on Twitter right now. The world is watching you for about 15 minutes. You can go home, cry about being quirkless, and let that 15 minutes expire. Or you can come by my office tomorrow after school, and we can see if you're useful for anything other than jumping into traffic." She started walking away, swaying her hips. "Wait!" Izuku shouted. She paused. "Do you?" Izuku's voice trembled. "Do you think I can be a hero?" You looked back over her shoulder. She didn't give him the All Might smile. She didn't give him the platitude. "I think you're crazy," she said, a small, genuine smirk playing on her lips. "And in this line of work? Crazy is a good start. Don't be late, green bean." She turned the corner and vanished. Izuku stood alone on the sidewalk. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the battered street. He looked at the card in his hand. It was embossed. It smelled like expensive perfume and ozone. For the first time that day, the gray world had a splash of color. Purple. From the shadows of the alleyway, All Might watched. He had stayed hidden. He had seen Empty Lady intervene. He had seen her save the boys. He had seen her talk to the press, shielding young Midoriya from the vitriol of the other pros. He clutched his side, feeling the scar ache. "I was too late," he thought bitterly. "I hesitated. And she didn't." He had planned to approach the boy. To apologize. To maybe offer him something. But seeing the rookie hero hand the boy her card, seeing the spark return to Midoriya's eyes, All Might felt like an intruder. He found a hero, All Might realized. And it wasn't me. The symbol of peace turned and walked away into the darkness, leaving Izuku Midoriya to his new path. A path not paved with one for all, but with grit, tactics, and a very vain giantess. Izuku didn't walk home. He floated. When he opened the door to his apartment, his mother, Inko, rushed him. She had seen the news. There was crying. There was checkup for burns. There was a lot of hugging. Later that night, Izuku sat at his desk. The burnt notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future number 13, sat open. The pages were charred but legible. He picked up a pen. He turned to a fresh page. He didn't write about All Might. He taped the purple business card to the top of the page. Underneath, he wrote, "Mt. Lady Utakayama, quirk, gigantification. Strengths, massive power, crowd control, media manipulation, decisiveness. Weaknesses, narrow spaces, though she ignores this risk. Property damage costs, vanity. Observation, she uses her size not just for power, but for shielding. She prioritized the save over the lull." He stared at the page. "I'm not giving up," he whispered to the empty room. He looked at his All Might poster on the wall. The smile that had always brought him comfort now felt distant. It belonged to everyone. It belonged to the world. But the smirk Empty Lady gave him? That felt like a challenge. Izuku closed the notebook. Tomorrow, he wasn't going to be Deku, the quirkless loser. Tomorrow, he was going to be an intern. He turned off the lamp. For the first time in years, when Izuku Midoriya closed his eyes, he didn't dream of being saved. He dreamed of climbing a mountain. The morning sun hit Izuku Midoriya's face with the subtle grace of a flashbang grenade. He groaned, rolling over in his bed, his limbs heavy and his head throbbing with a phantom ache. For a few blissful seconds, hovering in the hypnagogic state between sleep and wakefulness, he forgot. Then, the memories of yesterday crashed down on him like a collapsing building, the sludge, the suffocating heat, the red eyes of his childhood friend pleading for help, the rush of wind as he ran, the impact of the backpack, and then the voice. "You can become a hero even without power." No, wait. That wasn't right. That was the dream, the fantasy he had played on a loop in his head for 10 years. The reality was a skeletal man on a rooftop, coughing blood and shattering his world with a compassionate, devastating no. Izuku sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at the All Might poster on his wall. The Golden Age version of the hero beamed down at him, fists on his hips, cape billowing in an unseen wind. Usually, this image filled Izuku with determination. Today, it felt like looking at a photo of an ex-girlfriend. It was painful, distant, and reminded him of something he could never have. "I cannot simply say you can become a hero even without power." Izuku sighed, swinging his legs out of bed. His feet touched the cold floor. Right. Reality check. He shuffled to his desk. There, sitting next to his burnt, taped-together notebook, was the purple business card. MT. Lady Agency Utakayama. It caught the morning light, the gold embossing shimmering. It looked out of place in his room, surrounded by primary colored hero merch and stacks of textbooks. It looked professional. Adult. She probably just gave it to me to shut the reporters up, Izuku muttered to himself, picking up the card. The cardstock was thick, high quality. A PR stunt. Just like she said? Titan Savior. What a joke. But he didn't put the card down. He ran his thumb over the raised lettering. I think you're crazy. And in this line of work? Crazy is a good start. Izuku looked at the clock. If he didn't hurry, he'd be late for school. And today, of all days, he couldn't be late. The walk of shame was going to be bad enough without a tardy slip. Aldera Junior High was a shark tank on the best of days. Today, there was blood in the water. As Izuku walked through the gates, he could feel the eyes on him. Usually, he was invisible, a pebble on the side of the road. Today, he was a spectacle. That's him, right? The kid from the news? I heard he tried to commit suicide and accidentally ran into the villain. No way. I heard he was trying to show off for MT Lady. Idiot. He's quirkless. He probably just tripped. Izuku kept his head down, gripping the straps of his spare backpack, a plain black one, devoid of All Might keychains, until his knuckles turned white. He navigated the hallway with practiced ease, dodging the shoulders aimed at his chest and the feet stuck out to trip him. When he slid open the door to Class 3A, the noise level dropped to 0. Every face turned to him. Some were mocking, some were confused, some were just morbidly curious. Izuku walked to his desk at the back. It was, thankfully, free of graffiti this morning. Perhaps the sheer stupidity of his actions yesterday had confused his bullies enough that they hadn't planned a prank yet. He sat down and pulled out his textbooks. He could feel a burning gaze boring into the side of his skull. Katsuki Bakugo sat 2 rows ahead and 1 to the right. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't popping explosions in his palms. He was sitting in absolute, vibrating silence, staring at his desk like he was trying to incinerate it with his mind. Bakugo hadn't looked at him. He hadn't acknowledged him. The silence was worse than the shouting. The shouting was a known variable. This silence was a pressure cooker waiting to explode. The teacher entered, clapping his hands. All right, settle down. I know yesterday was eventful for some of us. But the entrance exams are approaching, and we don't have time for distractions. He glanced at Izuku, his expression a mix of pity and annoyance. Midoriya, try to stay in your seat today. We don't need any more excitement. The class snickered. Izuku shrank into his collar. Yes, sensei. The day dragged on in agonizing slow motion. Every lesson felt like background noise. Izuku's mind was a chaotic storm of conflicting thoughts. Should I go? He looked at the clock. 11 a.m. It's just an internship. She said she needs someone to sort mail. That's not hero work. That's being a secretary. 1 p.m. But it's a hero agency. Even if I'm just making coffee, I'd be inside the system. I'd see how they operate. I'd see the logistics, the strategy, the paperwork. 2:30 p.m. All Might said I can't be a hero. He didn't say I couldn't help them. When the final bell rang, Izuku was out of his seat before the echo faded. He packed his bag with robotic efficiency, desperate to escape before Bakugo decided to break his silence. He made it to the shoe lockers before he was intercepted. Deku. Izuku froze. He slowly turned around. Bakugo stood there, hands in his pockets, his posture slouching but radiating aggression. His eyes were shadowed. Keikaken, Izuku stammered, clutching his bag. Bakugo took a step forward. The other students in the locker area scrambled away, sensing the blast radius. You think you're better than me? Bakugo asked quietly. His voice wasn't a roar. It was a low growl. No! Izuku waved his hands frantically. No, of course not. You looked down on me, Bakugo hissed. Yesterday. You looked at me like I was some weakling who needed saving. By you? By a quirkless, worthless pebble. I didn't think anything. Izuku blurted out, the truth spilling out of him. I just moved. I couldn't watch you die, Kaken. That's all. Bakugo stared at him, his teeth grinding audibly. For a moment, it looked like he was going to attack. His hands twitched in his pockets. Then, he scoffed. It was a wet, ugly sound. Whatever, Bakugo spat. Don't think this changes anything. You're still nothing. You're just a bug that got lucky the giant lady stepped in. Stay out of my way, Deku. Or next time, I won't stop. Bakugo turned and stormed off, kicking a locker as he left, leaving a dent in the metal. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He leaned against the lockers, his legs shaking. Nothing changed, he thought. He's right. I'm still nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the purple card. But maybe I don't have to be. He changed his shoes, tied the laces tight, and walked out of the school. He didn't turn left toward his apartment. He turned right, toward the train station. The address on the card led to the Minato ward. Izuku stood on the sidewalk, checking the card, then checking the building, then checking the card again. This can't be right. In his mind, Empty Lady was a superstar. She was beautiful, powerful, and commanded the attention of the entire nation. Her agency should be a glass-paneled skyscraper with a golden statue in the lobby and a receptionist who looked like a model. The building in front of him was a 4-story walk-up squeezed between a curry shop and a laundromat. The paint was peeling. There was a vending machine out front with a flickering light that buzzed like an angry hornet. A small, handwritten sign was taped to the buzzer of apartment 3B, Empty Lady office. Deliveries leave at door. No solicitors. This is sketchy, Izuku whispered. This is incredibly sketchy. Is this a kidnapping plot? Does she harvest organs to pay for the property damage? He swallowed hard. He had come this far. He couldn't back down now. He pressed the buzzer. Bzzzzzt. Silence. He pressed it again. Bzzzzzt. What? The voice crackled through the intercom, loud and distorted. It sounded less like a hero and more like a bear that had been poked with a stick. Hello? Izuku shouted into the speaker box. It's, Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. The green bean? Silence. A long, agonizing pause. Who? The kid from the sludge incident? You gave me a card? Oh. The tone shifted instantly from rage to boredom. The doors unlocked. 3rd floor. Don't let the cat out. You have a cat? Click. The connection cut. Izuku pushed the door open. The lobby smelled of old mail and damp carpet. He trudged up the stairs, the yellow backpack feeling heavier with every step. This is a mistake, his brain chanted. Go home. Study for general education. Be a salaryman. He reached the 3rd floor. Door 3B was painted a garish purple that didn't match the rest of the hallway. He knocked timidly. It's open. Enter. Izuku turned the handle and pushed the door open. Excuse me, He stopped. His jaw dropped. The room was a disaster. It was a decent-sized apartment, clearly functioning as a living space and an office simultaneously. But it looked like a tornado had struck it, gotten bored, and then a second, messier tornado had come through to finish the job. Clothes were everywhere. Civilian clothes, hero costume pieces, unmatched socks. There were takeout boxes stacked in precarious towers on the coffee table. Empty water bottles littered the floor like a plastic minefield. A desk in the corner was buried under a mountain of paperwork that seemed to be actively sliding off the edge. And in the middle of it all, lying face down on a beige sofa, was Yutakiyama. She wasn't wearing her hero costume. She was wearing gray sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt that said "I woke up like this," which was technically true, but terrifying. Her blonde hair was a bird's nest. One arm dangled off the sofa, holding a half-eaten bag of potato chips. Shut the door, she mumbled into the couch cushion. The draft is cold. Izuku stood frozen in the doorway, his image of the glamorous superhero shattering into a million pieces. Empty lady? She groaned, rolling over. She sat up, rubbing her face. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that the makeup usually hid. Call me you. Or boss. Or Her Highness. Whatever keeps me from firing you. Firing me? Izuku squeaked, closing the door behind him. I haven't even been hired yet. You blinked, her eyes focusing on him. She squinted. Right. Green bean. You actually came. She reached for a bottle of water on the table, realized it was empty, and tossed it onto the floor with the others. Have a seat, she said, gesturing to a beanbag chair that was currently occupied by a pile of laundry. Just move the bras. Put them on the floor. Izuku turned a shade of red that defied the laws of physics. I'll stand. Suit yourself. Yu yawned, stretching her arms. A loud pop echoed from her shoulder. So, you want to be a hero, huh? Izuku clutched his backpack straps. Yes. More than anything, and you're quirkless. Yes. And you have zero combat training, zero experience, and the survival instincts of a lemming. Izuku winced. I suppose that's fair. You leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. The laziness vanished from her eyes, replaced by a sharp, predatory calculation. Here's the deal, kid. I'm not All Might. I don't do charity. I don't do inspirational speeches about the power of dreams. She gestured around the room. I am 23 years old. I have been a pro hero for exactly 48 hours. I am currently 35 million yen in debt because the Ito building has excellent lawyers. My agency consists of me, this room, and a website I haven't updated since I was in high school. She picked up a chip and crunched it loudly. I need help, she said frankly. But I can't afford a real sidekick. Pros want salaries. They want benefits. They want safe working conditions. She pointed a chip at him. You're desperate. You want in the door so bad you're vibrating. You're smart, I saw those eyes yesterday, and since you're quirkless, nobody expects anything from you, which means nobody is going to try to poach you from me. Izuku felt a strange mixture of insult and validation. So, you want to use me? I want to employ you, she corrected. Unpaid internship, obviously. But I'll write you a recommendation letter for you, a general ed or business course when the time comes. In exchange, you organize my life. She waved a hand at the chaos. You handle the schedule. You answer the fan mail. Make me sound gracious and humble, or whatever people like. You track the villain hotspots so I don't spend 4 hours patrolling quiet neighborhoods. You be the guy in the chair. Izuku looked around the messy room. He looked at the stacks of unopened envelopes spilling off the desk. He looked at the whiteboard on the wall that just said "Get money" in red marker. It wasn't hero work. It was being a janitor, a secretary, and a manager all at once. It was perfect. Izuku felt a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I can do that. You raised an eyebrow. You sure? It's not glamorous. You're not gonna be punching bad guys. You're gonna be fetching my protein shakes. I've been analyzing heroes since I was 4, Izuku said, his voice gaining a little steadiness. I know how agencies operate. I know the patrol routes of the top 10 heroes in Mizurafu. I know the paperwork requirements for collateral damage claims, Form 33B for structural, 34C for personal injury. You stared at him. She slowly lowered the chip. You know the damage forms? I read the public legal archives for fun, Izuku admitted, blushing. And I notice you didn't file the intent to engage notice before you entered the alleyway yesterday. If we file a retroactive amendment claiming imminent civilian peril under Clause 4, we might be able to reduce the liability on the Ito building by about 15%. The room went silent. The only sound was the refrigerator humming. Yu Takayama looked at Izuku Midoriya. Then she looked at the pile of legal threats on her desk. Then she looked back at Izuku. A slow, wide grin spread across her face. It wasn't the heroic smile. It was the smile of a pirate who just found a map. 15%? She whispered. That's 5 million yen. She stood up, walked over to Izuku, and slammed her hands onto his shoulders. You're hired, she declared. Welcome to the Empty Lady Agency. Don't touch my special yogurt in the fridge. Get to work. Izuku did not go home immediately. He texted his mother that he was studying at the library, a lie that made his stomach twist, but necessary, and then he went to war. The enemy was entropy. Do you have a filing cabinet? Izuku asked, holding a stack of papers that smelled like curry. I have a bathtub, Yu replied from the couch, where she was scrolling through Instagram. That is not the same thing. Izuku found a stack of cardboard boxes in the closet. He began sorting. Box 1 fan mail. Box 2, Bills urgent. Box 3 bills collections. Box 4 legal/liability. Box 5 Hero Association mandates. As he worked, his anxiety began to melt away, replaced by the comforting rhythm of organization. This was something he could do. He couldn't smash robots or fly, but he could alphabetize chaos. He picked up a patrol log. It was a mess of scribbles on a napkin. Tuesday, patrolled downtown. Nothing. Ate crepe. Saw Kamui? He ignored me. Jerk, Izuka sighed. Empty lady, you-san. You need to log your patrol hours digitally. The Hero Public Safety Commission requires GPS data for stipend payouts. If you don't log the coordinates, you don't get the hourly base pay, you groaned, throwing an arm over her eyes. But the app is so clunky. It crashes every time I try to input a villain capture. I can do it for you, Izuka said, pulling out his own phone. I can sync your phone's GPS history to the Commission's portal. I just need your login. Password is Moneybags123, she mumbled. That is terrible security. Just fix it, green bean. 2 hours passed. The sun began to dip lower, casting orange light through the dusty blinds. The floor was now visible. The clothes were in a pile. Izuka refused to touch the underwear, kicking them into the bedroom with his eyes squeezed shut. The desk was clear. Izuka sat at the desk, feeling a strange sense of ownership. This was his desk now. He picked up the last item, his own notebook, which he had placed on the corner. You sat up. She had actually fallen asleep for 20 minutes, but the smell of the room had changed. It smelled less like trash and more like lemon pledge? She blinked, looking around. Whoa, she breathed. I have a floor. She looked at the kid. He was hunched over the desk, muttering to himself, scribbling furiously in that burnt notebook of his. She stood up and walked over behind him. She moved silently, surprising for a woman who could turn into a giant. What you writing? She asked. Izuka jumped about a foot in the air. I was just notes. Sorry. I can stop. He tried to slam the book shut, but she caught it with one hand. Her grip was iron. Hero analysis for the future. Number 13? She read the cover. She flipped it open. The pages were dense. Sketches, diagrams, paragraphs of text in tiny, frantic handwriting. She flipped past pages on Kamui Woods, weak against thermal fluctuation, backdraft, water pressure limits, and landed on the page with her card taped to it. She read silently. Kenyan Cannon, high impact, but requires 3-second wind-up. Vulnerable to speed types during growth phase. Weakness, joint stress. Shifting mass rapidly puts strain on knees. Notice she favors her right leg when landing. Potential ACL risk if she pivots too hard on asphalt. Optimization, if she grows only her limbs. Partial transformation, she could minimize collateral damage while maintaining reach. Is that possible? Need to research biology of gigantification quirks. You stared at the page. She touched her right knee. It had been aching lately. She thought she just slept on it wrong. You noticed I favor my right leg? She asked quietly. Izuka swallowed. Yes. When you landed yesterday, you shifted your weight to the left immediately. And in the footage from your debut, you kick with your left. Usually, right-handed fighters kick with their right. It suggests a subconscious guarding of the joint. He braced himself for her to yell at him. To tell him he was creepy. To tell him to mind his own business. You closed the notebook. She tapped it against her chin, staring at him with unreadable eyes. Partial transformation, she muttered. I never thought of that. I usually just go all or nothing. Big is better, right? Big is strong, Izuka corrected, his analysis brain taking over the wheel. But big is slow. And big is expensive. If you could just grow your fist, you'd have the impact of a wrecking ball with the speed of a human. And you wouldn't destroy the street. You looked at her hand. She flexed her fingers. She imagined it. Punching a villain without growing 60 feet tall. No broken windows. No crushed cars. No lawsuits. She looked back at the scrawny, trembling boy in the oversized school uniform. Yesterday, she thought he was a PR stunt. 10 minutes ago, She thought he was a cheap secretary. Now, she realized what he actually was. He was a targeting computer. He was a strategist. He was the brain she didn't have the patience to use. She tossed the notebook back onto the desk. "You're weird, Midoriya," she said. Izuku slumped. "I know. But," she added, walking toward the fridge, "it's a useful kind of weird. Tomorrow, bring gym clothes." Izuku blinked. "Gym clothes? Why? Do I have more cleaning to do?" You pulled out a protein shake, her last one. She popped the tab and took a swig. "You said I need to protect my knees, right?" She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "If I'm gonna try this partial transformation thing, I need a test dummy to punch, and since you're the one who suggested it, you're up." Izuku's eyes widened in horror. "Wait, you want to practice punching me? Relax, I'll pull my punches." "Probably." She grinned. "Besides, you want to be a hero, don't you? Heroes get hit. Consider it durability training." "That sounds like abuse." "It's an internship," she corrected cheerfully. "It's character building." She checked the clock. "Alright, get out of here. It's getting late, and if your mom calls the police on me for kidnapping, the paperwork will be a nightmare." Izuku stood up, grabbing his bag. He felt exhausted, his fingers smelled like dust, and he had just agreed to be a punching bag for a giant woman. He had never felt happier. "Thank you, Yu-san." He bowed deeply at the waist. "I'll see you tomorrow. I won't let you down." Yeah? Just don't forget to file that form for the Edo building." Izuku rushed to the door. As he opened it, he looked back. The room was clean. The sun was setting, filling the space with a warm, golden glow. Yu was standing by the window, looking out at the city, her silhouette framed against the skyline. She looked less like a chaotic mess and more like the titan she was supposed to be. "Hey, Green Bean," she called out, not turning around. "Yes? Good work today." Izuku smiled, a real, beaming smile that hurt his cheeks. "Thank you." He closed the door and ran down the stairs, taking them two at a time. Left alone in the silent, clean apartment, Yu Takayama let out a long breath. She walked over to the desk and picked up the notebook again. She opened it to the page with her name. Strengths: massive power, crowd control, media manipulation, decisiveness. Observation: she uses her size not just for power, but for shielding. She prioritized the save over the lull. She traced the words with her finger. Prioritized the save. Most people just saw her ass. Or her size. Or her destruction. This kid saw the one split-second decision she had made purely on instinct. Prioritize the save, she whispered to the empty room. She sat down in her chair, spinning it around. She looked at the organized piles of paper. For the first time since she started her agency, she didn't feel like she was drowning. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Hello? Midnight? You? It's rare for you to call. Usually, you just text me drunk complaints about the ranking system. Ha ha. Funny." You leaned back, putting her feet up on the clean desk. "Hey, listen. You used to teach at that sidekick seminar, right? The one about hand-to-hand combat for non-strength quirks?" "Yes, why? Planning on actually learning how to fight without stepping on people?" "Something like that," you said, looking at the door where the green-haired boy had left. "I've got a new intern. He's a project. I need some tips on how to train someone who breaks if you look at him wrong." "Oh? A protege? How exciting. Is he cute?" "He looks like a nervous broccoli," you deadpanned. "But he's got potential. He's smart. Scary smart." "Well," Midnight purred. "If he can handle you, he must be special. Good luck, you. Don't break him." "I'll try not to," you said. She hung up the phone. She looked at the whiteboard. She grabbed the eraser and wiped away "Get money." She picked up a marker and wrote something new. Project Titan Ant. She capped the marker with a satisfying click. Partial transformation, she mused, holding up her fist. She focused, trying to push her quirk into just her hand. Her skin tingled. Her knuckles popped. Her hand swelled slightly, then shrank back. It was hard. It was going to take work. "All right, Green Bean," she grinned in the dark. "Let's see who breaks first." Walking home under the streetlights, Izuku pulled out his phone. He opened the Hero News app. The headline was still about the sludge incident. But the subheader caught his eye. Opinion: who was the quirkless boy? Reckless vigilante or true hero? He didn't read the comments. He knew what they would say. Instead, he opened his notes app and started a new list. Things to do for you, San. 1. Research dietary requirements for gigantification, calcium? Protein? 2. Map out structural weak points of musitifu bridges. 3. Buy ice packs for me. 4. Become strong enough to be useful. He put the phone away and looked up at the stars. They were hard to see through the city lights, but they were there. He wasn't All Might's successor. He wasn't entering UA on a golden ticket. He was entering through the back door, carrying coffee and filing tax returns. But he was entering. Izuku Midoriya clenched his fist. I am here, he whispered to himself, trying out the phrase. It felt different now. Less like a proclamation of power, and more like a statement of fact. He was here. He was in the game. And he wasn't going anywhere. The Mount Lady Agency, formerly a biological hazard zone located on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in Minato Ward, had undergone a transformation. If one were to walk in 3 weeks ago, they would have been greeted by the scent of stale pizza, cheap perfume, and despair. Now, the air smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and aggressive productivity. The floor was visible, a shocking revelation that the wood was actually a nice shade of oak. The filing cabinets, once bought second-hand and used as glorified drink coasters, were now labeled, color-coded, and locked. And in the center of this newfound order sat the architect of the revolution. Izuku Midoriya adjusted his headset. The microphone boom hovered perfectly over his lips. His fingers flew across a dual-monitor setup, which he had convinced you to buy by showing her a tax loophole for equipment depreciation. Takayama-san, turn left at the next intersection, Izuku said, his voice calm and authoritative. Facial recognition software on the traffic cams just pinged a petty thief matching the description of purse snatcher B. He's heading toward the train station. On the screen, a GPS dot representing empty lady moved obediently. Got it, green bean, Yu's voice crackled through the headset. Background noise of city traffic and cheering fans filtered through. I see him. He's fast. Can I stomp him? Negative, Izuku said instantly, pulling up a structural overlay of the district. You are currently on top of a subterranean shopping arcade. The pavement is only 6 inches thick reinforced concrete. If you go giant, you will fall through the floor into a maid cafe. Estimated damages, 12 million yen. Plus potential casualties. Ugh. Fine. You groaned. So what? I have to chase him on foot. In heels? Use the fire escape on your right, Izuku directed, his eyes scanning 3 different maps at once. Cut through the alley. He's heading for the turnstiles. If you intercept him at the north exit, you can use your gigantification on just your arm to block the path without compromising the street structure. Zone B is solid bedrock. North exit. Roger. Izuku watched the dots converge. He held his breath. Canyon. Blockade. He heard the distant thud through the audio feed, followed by the screeching halt of footsteps and a terrified yelp from the thief. Got him! Yu announced triumphantly. Nice call on the bedrock. Not a single crack in the sidewalk. The crowd is going wild, by the way. They love a responsible giant. Izuku exhaled, slumping back in his ergonomic chair, another tax write-off. Great work, Yu-san. Don't forget to smile for the cameras. But don't give a statement until we review the body cam footage. And please remember to read him his rights this time. Yeah, Mom. I'm doing the wave. I'll be back in 20. Have my lunch ready? Chicken breast and broccoli. High protein, low sodium, for joint health. I hate you. See you soon. The line clicked dead. Izuku took off the headset and rubbed his temples. He looked at the whiteboard on the wall. The text Project Titan ANT was still there, but now it was surrounded by graphs, patrol routes, and a terrifyingly detailed budget plan. It had been a month since the sludge incident. A month since he had walked into this office as a trembling fanboy, and walked out as an unpaid intern. In that month, Izuku Midoriya had learned a fundamental truth about the hero industry. It wasn't about flashy fights. It was about logistics. It was about PR cycles. It was about ensuring that the cost of saving the day didn't exceed the revenue generated by merchandise sales. And strangely enough, he was good at it. He picked up his notebook, Agency Logistics Strategy Volume 1, and made a note. Observation: Yusan is getting faster at de-escalating size. Partial transformation of the forearm is becoming smoother. Response time down by 14%. He looked at his hands. They were covered in paper cuts, not battle scars. I'm helping, he whispered to himself, trying to make the words stick. I'm part of it. But as he looked at the live feed of MT Lady waving to a cheering crowd, a small, cold knot formed in his stomach. He was part of it, yes. But he was safe in a chair 3 miles away. He was the voice in the ear. He wasn't the hero. This tastes like cardboard soaked in sadness. Yu Takayama poked the steamed chicken breast with her fork, looking at it with deep suspicion. She was sitting on the office sofa, her legs thrown over the armrest, still wearing the bodysuit of her costume, minus the mask and horns. It's lean protein, Izuku said from his desk, not looking up from a spreadsheet. Your bone density scan came back last week. Rapid size fluctuation leaches calcium from your system. If you want to keep growing to 60 feet without snapping a femur by age 30, you need to eat the sadness chicken, you groaned, shoving a piece of meat into her mouth. You're a tyrant. A tiny, green tyrant. I'm the pro-hero here. I should be eating steak. When we clear the debt from the Edo building incident, you can have steak, Izuku countered. According to my projections, that will be in fiscal year 202X. I'll be old by then, you chewed aggressively, watching her in turn. He was different than he was a month ago. His posture was better. He didn't stutter as much, at least not around her. He moved with a frantic, nervous energy, but it was directed energy. He was like a machine that ran on caffeine and anxiety. She admired it. And, she had to admit, she relied on it. Her ranking had jumped from 208 to 165 in just 4 weeks. Efficient resolution and reduced collateral were the buzzwords on the hero forums regarding her recent activity. Hey, Green Bean, she said, swallowing the dry chicken. Yes, Yusan? You've been brooding. Izuku froze. His fingers stopped typing. I haven't been brooding. I'm working on the quarterly tax. You have the Deku face, she interrupted. You get this crease between your eyebrows. And you sigh every time you see a highlight reel of All Might. Spill it. Izuku turned his chair around. He looked at his hands again. It's just... He hesitated. I'm useful here, right? Extremely. I haven't been sued in 12 days. That's a record. But is this it? Izuku looked up, his large green eyes filled with a raw, painful vulnerability. I mean, do you think I could ever be out there? Like you? Not just as the guy in the chair, but standing next to you? The room went quiet. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. You put her fork down. The playful demeanor vanished. Her face hardened, not into anger, but into a weary kind of seriousness that made her look older than 23. Midoriya, she said softly. We talked about this. I know, Izuku said quickly, sensing the rejection. I know I don't have a quirk. But there are heroes with weak quirks. There are heroes who fight with support items. If I trained, if I learned martial arts, it's not about skill, you cut him off. Her voice was flat. It's about durability. It's about physics. She stood up and walked over to him. She towered over him even in her normal form. She reached out and poked him in the chest. It wasn't hard, but he flinched. You're squishy, Izuku, she said. I've seen what villains can do. I've seen a guy with a strength enhancer quirk punch through a brick wall like it was wet tissue paper. If that hits me, I bruise, maybe crack a rib. If that hits you, you turn into a red mist. I could dodge, Izuku argued weakly. I could use strategy. Like I did with the sludge villain. That was luck, you said sharply. You gambled your life on a backpack throw. You can't gamble every day. The house always wins eventually. She leaned back against the desk, crossing her arms. Look, I know it sucks. I know you want to be All Might. But you have a brain that's worth 10 strength quirks. You're saving people right now. You saved that maid cafe from getting crushed today. Isn't that enough? Izuku looked down. I guess it wasn't enough. It felt like watching a movie of someone else living his life. Yu sighed. She hated being the adult. She hated crushing the kid's dream. But she'd rather crush his dream than identify his body at the morgue. Tell you what, she said, forcing a lighter tone. I have a public appearance this afternoon. Some ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new park in the shopping district. Boring PR stuff. Come with me. Izuku blinked. To the field? Yeah. You can be my security liaison. Keep the creepy fanboys away, hold my purse, and make sure I don't say anything offensive to the mayor. She grinned. Get some fresh air. Get out of the chair for a bit. Izuku's eyes lit up, just a fraction. Okay. I'll grab the portable analytical kit, and the emergency first aid bag and the spare autograph boards and just grab my purse, kid. The Kiyoshi Ward shopping district was bustling. It was a kaleidoscope of neon signs, shouting vendors, and the scent of takoyaki. Yu Takayama, in full empty lady regalia, was walking down the center of the promenade like she owned it. Which, given her personality, she believed she did. She waved to the crowd, blew kisses, and stopped to take selfies with trembling teenagers. Izuku walked 2 steps behind and 1 step to the left, scanning the perimeter. He wore his school uniform. He still didn't have a costume or official gear, but he had a headset around his neck and a serious expression that made him look like a very intense hall monitor. Crowd density is rising, Izuku muttered into his recorder. Risk of stampede is low, but bottleneck potential at the crepe stand is high. Relax, green bean, Yu whispered out of the side of her mouth, while smiling for a photo with a toddler. Enjoy the adoration? It's intoxicating. I'm just monitoring the variables, Izuku insisted. They reached the central plaza where the new park was located. A small stage was set up. The mayor was there, adjusting his sash. Yu stepped up to the VIP area, instantly turning on the high-wattage charm. Izuku stood by the stairs, holding her massive designer bag and a bottle of water. He watched her work the room. It was a different kind of heroism. She made people smile. She made them feel safe just by being there. She's right, Izuku thought, a bitter taste in his mouth. She's a titan. I'm just me. I should be happy I get to hold the water bottle. He scanned the crowd again. Habit. A man in a gray hoodie was standing near the back. He wasn't looking at empty lady. He was looking at the support pillars of the monorail track that ran directly over the plaza. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Behavioral analysis. Stationary in a high-flow zone. Hands in pockets. Erratic eye movement. The man pulled a hand out of his pocket. He touched the steel pillar. The steel didn't bend. It didn't break. It rippled. Like water. Izuku's heart stopped. Matter manipulation? Density shifting? The man touched another pillar. It rippled too. The monorail was coming. Izuku could hear the hum of the tracks. If those pillars lost their structural integrity when the train passed. Yu-san! Izuku shouted, forgetting protocol. Yu turned, mid-laugh with the mayor. Huh! The pillars! The monorail! Izuku pointed, screaming. At that exact moment, the villain in the gray hoodie slammed both palms onto the ground. Vibration vector. The ground didn't shake. The air didn't shake. But the kinetic energy traveled silently, instantly, through the pavement and up into the steel columns. The steel shattered. Not bent, shattered, exploding like glass under high pressure. The track above groaned, the concrete buckling. The monorail train, screaming around the bend, hit the compromised section. Derailment. Crap! Yu's eyes went wide. Instinct took over. She didn't wait for Izuku's calculation. She didn't check for property damage. Gigantification. With a boom that displaced the air in the plaza, empty lady exploded upwards. She grew to her full 68 feet in a split second, catching the falling monorail car on her shoulders like Atlas holding up the sky. The crowd screamed and scrambled back. Debris rained down, bouncing off her giant purple horns. I got it! She grunted, her knees buckling under the weight of the train and the track. Get the civilians clear! I can't hold this forever. She was a pillar now. A living, breathing pillar holding up tons of steel and hundreds of passengers. She couldn't move. She couldn't shrink. She was completely immobilized by her own heroism, which was exactly what the villain wanted. Big target, the man in the gray hoodie sneered. He walked casually through the panicked crowd toward empty lady's exposed leg. Easy target. Izuku saw him. Stop! Izuku yelled, dropping the purse. He sprinted toward the villain. The villain turned. He wore a mask now, a simple mirrored visor. Out of the way, kid, the villain said calmly. He raised a hand. Vector reflect. He didn't shoot a beam. He just waited. Izuku skidded to a halt 10 feet away. Analysis mode, active. He touched the pillars and they shattered. He called it vibration vector. He's not creating force. He's manipulating existing force. He turned the train's weight against the pillars. If he touches Yusan while she's under that much load, don't touch her. Izuku screamed. Make me, the villain laughed. He lunged toward empty lady's ankle. You couldn't see him. She was focused on the train. Midoriya! What's happening down there? I feel a mosquito. It's a villain! Izuku yelled into his headset. He's going for your Achilles. Don't move. I can't move anyway. The villain was fast. He was closing the distance. Izuku looked around. No weapons. No heroes nearby. Just debris. Think. Quirk. Vector manipulation. Likely tactile. He needs to touch the object to inject or redirect the kinetic energy. Weakness. He has to touch it. Izuku grabbed a handful of gravel and shattered glass from the ground. It was pathetic ammunition, but he remembered something from his notes on emitter types. Concentration is key. Disruption of sensory input disrupts the quirk factor. The villain reached out to touch Yu's skin. Hey! Izuku threw the gravel. Not at the villain's body. At his face. The handful of dust and glass pinged off the villain's visor. It didn't hurt him, but the sudden clatter and the obstruction of vision made him flinch. He pulled his hand back instinctively. You little brat! The villain spun around, annoyed. Fine. I'll deal with the fly first. He charged at Izuku. Izuku froze. This was it. The moment you had warned him about. The squishy human versus the superpowered threat. The villain swung a fist. His fist was vibrating with stored kinetic energy. Dodge. Izuku dropped. He didn't think about it. He just let gravity take him. He collapsed his knees, falling into a squat, letting the fist sail over his messy green hair. The wind pressure from the punch stung his scalp. Low center of gravity. Judo basics. He was on the ground. The villain was off balance, carried forward by his own momentum. Izuku saw the villain's leg. Don't punch. Trip. Izuku kicked out, hooking his foot behind the villain's ankle and shoving hard against the knee. It was sloppy, unrefined, and desperate. But physics is universal. The villain stumbled. He fell forward, his vibrating hand slapping the pavement to catch himself. Crack. The pavement exploded where his hand touched it, the stored energy backfiring into the ground. The shockwave blew the villain backward, knocking the wind out of him. Izuku scrambled back, crab walking away, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The villain groaned, shaking his head. He stood up, looking furious. The visor was cracked. Okay, the villain growled. Now you die. He raised both hands. The air began to hum. He was gathering ambient vibration, sound, footsteps, everything. Izuku was on his back. He had nothing left. No gravel. No tricks. I'm sorry, Yusan. I tried. Shadows fell over him. The villain paused. He looked up. A massive, purple-clad finger, the size of a telephone pole, was hovering directly over him. You had managed to shift her stance. She was still holding the train with one shoulder in her head, straining every muscle in her giant body, but she had freed one arm. She looked down, her face contorted in pain and rage. Her mascara was running. She looked terrifying. Get away, she boomed, her voice shaking the fillings in Izuku's teeth. From my intern. Canyon snap? She didn't punch him. She flicked him. Using her thumb and middle finger, she unleashed a flick that carried the force of a gale wind cannon. The air pressure alone hit the villain like a truck. He was launched, literally launched, across the plaza. He skipped across the fountain, crashed through a hedge, and embedded himself in the wall of a bakery 50 meters away. You groaned, her arm dropping. She grabbed the train track again with both hands to stabilize it. Midoriya! She yelled. Are you alive? If you died, I'm firing you. Izuku sat up, trembling. He checked his arms. He checked his legs. He was covered in dust, his knees were scraped, and his uniform was torn. But he wasn't a red mist. I'm here! He shouted up at her. I'm okay. Good, she wheezed. Now call the police. And tell them to bring a crane. My back is killing me. The aftermath was the usual chaos, but with a different flavor. The police arrived. The fire department secured the train. Empty Lady was allowed to shrink down, collapsing onto a stretcher provided by the paramedics. She had strained 3 major muscle groups and had a hairline fracture in her collarbone from the weight of the train. Izuku sat in the back of an ambulance, getting a bandage applied to his knee. The press was circling, but the police were holding them back. Midoriya. Izuku looked up. You was walking over. She had refused the stretcher, though she was walking with a limp and holding an ice pack to her shoulder. Her costume was dusty, her hair a disaster. She sat down next to him on the ambulance bumper. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just stared at the hole in the bakery wall where the villain had been extracted. You disobeyed orders, she said finally. I know, Izuku whispered. I'm sorry. I saw the weakness. I knew if I could distract him. He almost turned you into paste. I know. You have no quirk. I know. You took the ice pack off her shoulder and pressed it against Izuku's bruised cheek. The cold was shocking, but it felt good. You tripped him, she said. A small smile tugged at her lips. I saw it. Sloppy form. You looked like a flailing crab. But you used his momentum. Judo, Izuku mumbled. I read about it. Using the opponent's force against them, you sighed. She looked at this kid. This reckless, terrifying, brilliant kid. She had told him to stay in the chair. She had told him he was too squishy. And yet if he hadn't been there, she would have been touched by that villain. If her density had been manipulated while she was holding that train, she would have shattered. The train would have fallen. Hundreds would have died. He saved her. Without a quirk. With a handful of gravel and a clumsy kick. You can't stay in the chair, she said softly. Izuku looked at her, eyes wide. What? I can't protect you if you're going to be throwing yourself at villains, she said. And clearly, you're going to keep throwing yourself at villains because you have a chronic lack of self-preservation. She stood up, wincing as her back popped. She looked down at him, her silhouette blocking out the setting sun. I'm not all might, she said. I can't give you power. I can't give you a quirk. But I can teach you how not to die. She offered him a hand. It was calloused, strong, and covered in concrete dust. We're going to change the contract, she said. No more just coffee and emails. Starting tomorrow, we wake up at 5 a.m. Izuku stared at the hand. Tears welled up in his eyes, big, fat, anime tears that poured down his face. Are you saying? I'm taking you on as a sidekick, she clarified. A combat sidekick. Just don't expect me to go easy on you. My fighting style is dirty, cheap, and unfair. That sounds perfect, Izuku sobbed. He reached out and took her hand. She pulled him to his feet. Stop crying, green bean, she laughed, patting him roughly on the back, nearly knocking the wind out of him again. You're getting snot on my costume. Come on. Let's go home. I need you to file the insurance claim for that bakery wall. Yes, ma'am. As they walked away from the flashing lights, Izuku limped slightly, but his head was up. He wasn't just the intern anymore. He wasn't just the fanboy. He was the partner. Rule 1, make them fall. The alarm clock on Izuku Midoriya's nightstand didn't have a chance to ring. His hand shot out from under the covers and silenced it at 4:59 a.m., a reflex born of 3 weeks of terror. Waking up early wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the anticipation. For the first 14 years of his life, Izuku had woken up expecting the day to be a test of emotional endurance. Now, he woke up expecting physical demolition. He rolled out of bed, his muscles singing a chorus of dull aches. His hamstrings felt like tight piano wires. His deltoids felt like they had been replaced with bags of wet sand. He looked at his hands. They were covered in small cuts and calluses, the skin rougher than it had been a month ago. He dressed in the dark, a ratty gray tracksuit that had seen better days. He grabbed a protein bar. You insisted on them, though she refused to eat them herself because they tasted like chalk, and his notebook. He paused by the door, looking at the All Might poster. The symbol of peace was smiling, offering encouragement. Sorry, All Might, Izuku whispered, adjusting his sneakers. No smiling today. Today is leg day. 5:30 a.m. Takoba Municipal Beach Park. The sun was just beginning to bleed over the horizon, painting the ocean in hues of violet and gold. It would have been a beautiful, serene scene, were it not for the mountains of garbage that blocked the view. Takoba Municipal Beach Park was less of a park and more of a graveyard for the city's unwanted things. Tires, refrigerators, rusted car chassis, driftwood, and unidentifiable plastic heaps stretched for acres. It was a monument to neglect, and standing in the middle of it, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed sun hat that cost more than Izuku's entire wardrobe, was Empty Lady. She was sitting on top of a crushed washing machine, sipping an iced coffee. You're late, she said, checking an invisible watch on her wrist. I'm 3 minutes early. Izuku protested, jogging up to her, his breath misting in the cool morning air. Early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable, you recited lazily. She hopped off the washing machine, landing with a grace that defied the uneven terrain. She wasn't in her hero costume today. She wore high-performance athletic gear, purple leggings and a crop top, that showed off a physique that was less fashion model and more Olympic athlete. All right, Green Bean, she said, clapping her hands. Welcome to the dojo of dirt. The cathedral of clutter. Izuku looked around. It's a dump. It's a resource, you corrected. She gestured grandly at the trash. Look at this. What do you see? Izuku squinted. Illegal dumping violations? A public health hazard? Wrong. You see mass. You see leverage. You see obstacles. She walked over to a rusted refrigerator that was half buried in the sand. All Might, bless his giant, flashy heart, would probably tell you to punch this. To smash it to pieces to build your muscles. Right, well, yeah? He's the symbol of peace. He punches away the darkness, and that works for him, you said? Because he's a semi-truck in human form. You. She poked Izuku in the chest. You're a Honda Civic. If you punch this fridge, you break your hand. The fridge wins. Game over. She patted the rusty metal. My fighting style, the canyon style, isn't about being stronger than the object. It's about being smarter than the gravity holding it down. She crouched low. Watch. She didn't grab the fridge near the top. She didn't try to lift it with her back. She wedged her hip against the center of gravity, hooked her leg around the base, and twisted. It wasn't a show of strength. It was a manipulation of physics. With a sharp exhale, she pivoted. The heavy fridge tipped, lost its balance, and crashed onto its side with a heavy thud. Center of gravity, you said, straightening up and dusting off her hands. I spend half my life being 60 feet tall. Do you know how hard it is to stay upright when you're that big? The wind pushes you, the ground crumbles. If I didn't understand balance, I'd be toppling over onto orphanages every other Tuesday. She turned to Izuku, her eyes visible over the rim of her sunglasses. You have no quirk. You have no super strength. So, if you want to beat a villain who weighs 300 pounds and has rocks for skin, you don't punch him. You make the earth hit him. She kicked a tire toward him. Your job, she announced, is to clear this beach. Izuku's jaw dropped. All of it? But there's tons of it, exactly. And I want it done by the entrance exam. She smirked. Because honestly? I want a nice, private place to sunbathe this summer where the paparazzi can't get good angles from the street. And this beach has a southern exposure. Izuku stared at her. Wait. Is this whole training arc just so you can get a tan? It's multitasking. You exclaimed, offended. I get a beach, you get muscles. It's a win-win. Now stop talking and start moving that truck axle. Use your hips, not your back. The montage, month 2-3. The training was grueling. It wasn't the heroic, uplifting montage Izuku had seen in movies. It was dirty, smelly, and painful. Yu Takayama was a harsh taskmaster. She didn't shout motivational quotes, she shouted physics corrections. Lower! She would yell from her perch on a pile of tires. Your center of gravity is too high. If a villain sweeps your leg right now, you're eating pavement. Izuku struggled. He tried to move a rusted safe. He pushed. He strained. Don't push it! You barked. You're 140 pounds soaking wet. That safe is 400. You can't outpush it. Tip it. Find the fulcrum. Izuku stopped, panting, sweat stinging his eyes. He looked at the safe. He looked at the sand underneath it. Fulcrum. He dug out the sand from under one corner. He wedged a steel pipe under the other side. He leaned his entire body weight onto the pipe. The safe groaned, tipped, and rolled. Better! You called out. But you looked ugly doing it. Again, they focused on Ashiwaza, foot techniques, and Yukimi, break falls. Before you learn to hit, you learn to get hit, you declared one Tuesday, laying out a gym mat on the sand. For 3 hours she threw him. She didn't use her quirk. She just used her height and reach. She grabbed his collar, swept his foot, and wham! Izuku hit the mat. You're stiff, she critiqued. If you land stiff, you break a bone. Disperse the impact. Slap the mat. Exhale on contact. Wham! Again. Wham! Again. Stop closing your eyes. By the end of the second month, Izuku wasn't winning, but he was landing softly. He learned to tuck his chin. He learned to roll with the momentum. He learned that the ground was inevitably going to meet his face, so he might as well be friends with it. And slowly, subtly, the boy changed. The scrawny neck thickened. The arms that used to look like noodles began to show definition, cords of lean muscle that twitched with functional power. He wasn't bulky like All Might. He was wiry. Compressed. He was beginning to look like an ant that could lift 10 times its body weight. Scene: the office visit. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in the 4th month of training. The beach was a mud pit, so operations had moved indoors to the agency. The office was humming. Izuku was at his desk, typing furiously. Quarterly budget review, he muttered to himself. If we switch utility providers, we can save 4%, and if USAN stops buying the premium shampoo, that's another 2%. The door buzzer rang. Delivery! A voice called out. It wasn't a delivery man. Izuku looked up as the door opened. 2 figures stepped in, bringing the scent of rain and ozone with them. One was a man made entirely of wood, wearing a sleek varnish. The other was a woman who seemed to be wearing mostly straps and confidence. Kamui Woods and Midnight. Izuku choked on his own saliva. He scrambled out of his chair, knocking over a stack of files. KK Kamui Woods. And the R18 hero, Midnight. Welcome. Please come in. Do you need tea? Coffee? I have herbal tea. Kamui Woods looked around the office, his wooden face impassive, though his eyes widened slightly at the cleanliness. Takayama actually cleaned up. I owe Death Arms 5,000 yen. I cleaned up. Izuku squeaked. I mean, the agency is under new management protocols. Midnight laughed, a throaty, purring sound. She walked over to Izuku, circling him like a shark eyeing a particularly interesting seal. She tapped his chin with her riding crop. So this is the green bean you won't shut up about, she mused. Cute. A bit twitchy, but cute. The bedroom door banged open. You emerged, wearing a facial mask that made her look like a green-faced ghost. Namuri! Shinji! She shouted. Don't harass the help. He bruises easily. We're just inspecting the merchandise, Midnight teased. You've been ghosting us for drinks lately, you? We heard you were playing teacher. We wanted to see if it was a midlife crisis or a genuine project. You peeled the mask off, tossing it into the trash can, which Izuku had emptied an hour ago. It's an investment. This kid is gonna be the brains of the operation. Amenities. Kamui Wood sat on the sofa, stiff as a board. You're training a quirkless child for the UA Hero course, he stated flatly. That is, optimistic. And dangerous. He's got grit, you said defensively, crossing her arms. More than some sidekicks I know. Grit doesn't stop a fireball, Kamui countered. He looked at Izuku. Boy. Why do you want to be a hero? Is it fame? Do you want to be like her? He gestured to empty lady. Izuku stood up straighter. He looked at the wooden hero. No, sir, Izuku said, his voice shaking but clear. I admire you, San. But I don't want fame. There are people who need help. And sometimes, the strongest heroes aren't there. Sometimes, you just need someone who is willing to move. He clenched his fists at his sides. I want to be the one who moves. Midnight's eyes softened. My. He's got the spirit, doesn't he? She smirked at you. Show us. You blinked. Show you what? What you've taught him, Midnight said. She stepped into the center of the room, clearing a space. If he's going to UA, he's going to face students with powerful quirks. Let's see if your canyon style works on something other than a refrigerator. Namuri, don't, you warned. He's not ready for. I'm ready, Izuku interrupted. Everyone looked at him. He was pale, sweating profusely, but he stepped forward. Please, Izuku said, bowing. Test me. Midnight grinned. It was a terrifying expression. All right, boy. Rules are simple. Touch me, and you win. If I knock you out, you lose. She raised her whip. Izuku took a breath. Hero name, Midnight. Quirk, somnambulist. She emits sleep-inducing aroma from her skin. She uses the whip to control distance and force opponents to inhale. Strategy, don't breathe. Close the distance. She's tall. High center of gravity. Go! Kamui barked. Midnight flicked her wrist. The whip cracked, aiming for Izuku's leg to trip him. Izuku didn't back up. He moved forward. He dove. It was the canyon dive, the move you used to enter the alleyway, adapted for a human. He threw himself low, sliding on his knees across the polished wood floor. The whip snapped harmlessly over his head. Midnight's eyes widened. Fast. Izuku was inside her guard. He couldn't punch her. She was a pro, she would block it. He had to destabilize her. He grabbed the fabric of her bodysuit near her knee and pulled while driving his shoulder into her thigh. It was a textbook takedown. Or it would have been, if Midnight wasn't a veteran. She pivoted instantly, spinning with his momentum. She didn't fall, she turned the spin into a kick, her heel catching Izuku in the ribs. Gah! Izuku tumbled, rolling across the floor. He hit the wall with a thud. Dead, Kamui would said. If that was a villain, you'd be finished. Izuku gasped for air, clutching his side. But his mind was racing. She spun. She used my momentum against me. Just like you taught me. Which means, she expects me to fight momentum. Midnight raised the whip again. Give up, cutie? Izuku stood up. He wobbled. Then, he charged again. Predictable, Midnight sighed. She swung the whip to wrap his arm. Izuku saw the coil coming. He didn't dodge. He stuck his arm out. The whip wrapped around his forearm. Gotcha, Midnight purred, yanking back to pull him off balance. But Izuku didn't pull back. He jumped. He jumped with the pull, launching himself through the air toward her. The sudden lack of resistance caught Midnight off guard. She stumbled back a half step. Izuku collided with her, not with a punch, but with a full-body tackle. His momentum, combined with her pull, turned him into a missile. They both went down. Midnight landed on her back with a startled oof. Izuku landed on top of her, his forehead knocking against her shoulder. Silence filled the room. Izuku scrambled off immediately, his face burning red. I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I didn't mean to. Midnight sat up, rubbing her lower back. She looked at Kamui Woods. Then she looked at you. Then she burst out laughing. He got me! She cackled. He actually got me. Did you see that? He used the whip as a zip line. Yu Takayama was standing by the desk, a look of shock on her face. Then, slowly, a smug grin spread across her lips. Told you, you said, popping her hip. Kid's a genius. Kamui Wood stood up. He walked over to Izuku, who was currently bowing apologetically to the floor. Midoriya, Kamui said. Izuku looked up. Why, yes, sir? That was reckless. Stupid. And effective. The wooden hero nodded once. Keep training. You might survive UA after all. As the guests left, Midnight pinching Izuku's cheek on the way out and whispering, "Call me when you're 18. You closed the door and leaned against it." She looked at her in turn. He was bruising already. He looked like a mess. "You okay?" she asked. "I think she cracked a rib," Izuku wheezed. "But..." I touched her. "You tackled the R18 hero," you corrected. "We're never going to hear the end of that at the next gala." She walked over and ruffled his messy green hair. "Good job, Aunt. Now clean the floor." You scuffed it. The beach, month 8, the climax. Winter had come and gone. The beach was different now. Where there had once been mountains of trash, there were now patches of actual sand. The horizon was visible. The smell had improved from rotting garbage to old seaweed, which was a significant upgrade. Izuku stood in the center of the remaining junk. He was shirtless, the morning sun gleaming off a sheen of sweat. He was unrecognizable from the boy who had started. His back was defined by ridges of muscle. His arms were corded and scarred from scrapes with rusty metal. He didn't look like a bodybuilder. He looked like a gymnast. Compact. Dense. You sat on her usual perch, now a lifeguard chair she had made him salvage and repair. "Final exam for Phase 1, she announced. She stood up. She stretched. And then she grew. She didn't grow to 60 feet. She grew to about 10 feet tall, a manageable, terrifying intermediate size. "Scenario," she boomed, her voice deeper. "I am a villain with a gigantification quirk. I am rampaging through a narrow street. You are the only hero on the scene. Stop me." She stomped forward. The sand shook. Izuku dropped into a stance. His feet were wide apart, knees bent. He took a deep breath. "Don't overpower her. Redirect her." You swung a massive fist. It was slow, telegraphed, but heavy. Izuku stepped inside the arc. He placed his hands on her wrist as it passed him, guiding it, adding just a fraction of his own force to her swing. She stumbled slightly, her fist burying itself in a pile of tires. "Not bad," she grunted, pulling her arm free. "But I'm not done." She went for a kick. A low sweep meant to knock him into the ocean. Izuku jumped. He pushed off her shin, using her own leg as a springboard. He flipped in the air, landing behind her. "Target the instability," he shouted to himself. He saw her pivot. She was turning on her left heel. The sand was loose there. Izuku didn't attack her. He attacked the ground. He grabbed a rusted iron rebar sticking out of a concrete slab near her foot. He yanked it upward with a roar, leveraging the slab. The ground shifted. Yu's heel slipped. "Whoa!" As she flailed for balance, Izuku rushed in. He didn't tackle her. She was too heavy. He slid between her legs, grabbed the back of her knee joint, and kicked the back of her ankle simultaneously. It was a precise breakdown of the kinetic chain. Yu's knee buckled. She fell. It was slow motion. A 10-foot giantess crashing down into the sand. Boom! Sand sprayed everywhere. Seagulls scattered. Izuku stood panting, his chest heaving. He looked down. Yu was lying on her back, staring up at the sky. She shrank back down to normal size instantly. Silence stretched between them. Izuku gasped. "I'm sorry. Did I hurt you?" He rushed forward to help her up. Yu slapped his hand away. She lay there, covering her eyes with her arm. Her shoulders started to shake. Izuku panicked. "Yu-san? Are you crying? I'll call an ambulance." "I'll call." "I'm laughing, you idiot," she choked out. She removed her arm. She was grinning wild, ferocious grin. "You dropped me," she said. "You actually dropped me." She sat up, shaking the sand out of her blonde hair. She looked at him with a gaze that held a new kind of respect. It wasn't the way a master looks at a student. It was the way a fighter looks at a contender. "You're not a pebble anymore, Midoriya," she said softly. "You're a boulder. An annoying, tripping boulder." She stood up and dusted herself off. She looked around the beach. It was 90% clear. A pristine stretch of white sand lay before them, sparkling in the sun. "And look at that," she said, gesturing to the view. "My tanning spot is ready." She walked over to where she had stashed a bag. She pulled out a towel and sunglasses. "All right. Training is over for today. Go home." Rest. Izuku blinked. But, it's only 9 a.m. We have administrative work. The fan mail. Take a day off, she ordered. She laid the towel down on the sand Izuku had cleared with his own blood and sweat. She lay down, basking in the sun. But you-san. Go! She waved him off without looking. You have the UA entrance exam in a week. You need to taper off. Let your muscles heal. Izuku hesitated. He looked at the beach. He looked at his hands. He felt a swell of pride so strong it almost knocked him over. Thank you, you-san! He shouted, bowing deeply. Thank you for everything. Yeah? Get lost. Izuku grabbed his bag and began the trek back to the street. When he was gone, Yu lowered her sunglasses. She watched his retreating figure. He's gonna do it, she whispered to the ocean. He's actually gonna do it. She looked at her own hand. During the spar, when he had tripped her, she had felt it, a split second of genuine hesitation. Not because she was afraid of hurting him, but because she was afraid he would counter her. She smiled, closing her eyes. Izuku walked home, but he stopped by a shop window. He saw his reflection. He wasn't the hunched, terrified boy from the sludge incident. He stood tall. His eyes were sharp. He wore his scars like medals. He pulled out his phone. He opened the Notes app. Analysis, me, strengths, low center of gravity, environmental awareness, tactical redirection, weaknesses, reach, raw power, stamina against multiple opponents. Solution, don't fight fair. Fight smart. He put the phone away. Next week was UA. Next week was Bakugo. Next week was the proving ground. But today? Today he was going to eat a katsudon bowl the size of his head, and he wasn't going to feel guilty about the carbs. Because Empty Lady said so?